The Leafs look to get back on track in Tampa, and should Brad Treliving do some Black Friday shopping? We've got a list of names that could be of interest for the Maple Leafs. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leafs-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. What's going on, Dave? How we feeling on a Friday?
Pretty good. Did some pre-Black Friday shopping. Got myself a new phone. Picked up a couple. Just got some things out of the way before the mad rush on Black Friday. I had no desire to be out there in the mall on a Black Friday.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I did a couple of things online, but there's still some things that I wouldn't mind picking up over the next couple of days. And then you also got Cyber Monday on Monday, so it's a good time to be shopping. And speaking of, we'll have a fun little segment that we're going to get to in a little bit, in about 15 minutes time, chatting about possibly some Black Friday shopping that Brad Treliving could be doing on his own. We both have put together a list of 3 guys who, the Maple Leafs could try and go and shop for and make a trade for to bolster their roster. So we'll get to that in a little bit, and we'll also continue looking at the playoff pretenders and contenders. We looked at the Eastern Conference yesterday at the midway mark or the quarterway mark, which is also kind of considered the American Thanksgiving point. And then the other checkpoint, or we did the East yesterday, we're going to do the West today. So we'll get to all that. But there's a game tomorrow also for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and it's against the Tampa Bay Lightning, which is always a tough task for the Leafs. I mean, obviously, there's a pretty good long history between these two teams over the last few seasons. Toronto with a big win last time they went out. They made Tampa look like fools. Realistically, you know that the Lightning are definitely going to want to bounce back, especially in their own barn.
Oh, definitely. And, the Leafs and Lightning have had their fair share of intense matchups over the last few years, right? So these are two teams that know each other very well. Tampa's realizing Toronto's kind of in a different they're going down a different path right now with Craig Berube. This is not the Sheldon Keefe Leafs that they probably were accustomed to playing against these last few years. So familiarity on both sides, but in a lot of ways, Leafs have shown Tampa why things are a little different for them this time around.
Yeah, a little different. And I mean, Tampa's, a little different as well, obviously, since they last met in the playoffs a couple of years ago. But they're going to be ready. I mean, we saw it the other night in Florida. It doesn't matter how, poor team is playing like Tampa. They've lost 3 of their last 4 games going into it. Vasilevsky has a sub 900 save percentage in 3 of the 4 games coming into this one. But you just know that they're going to wake up and give Toronto everything they've got. I think it's going to be similar to the other night where the Leafs, you got to make sure that you get out of the first 10 minutes unscathed. If they can do that, then I think the Leafs will be fine, but Tampa's going to be buzzing early, I do believe. So, if they can weather the early storm, I think they'll be in good shape. And let's hope they get some reinforcements back. We're not sure what the situation is going to be for Bobby McMahon. He's going to, day to day, and will be a game time decision, I'm sure, with that lower body injury he suffered in Florida. Few days off in between, so maybe he'll be ready for Saturday. I guess we'll find out over the next couple of days. We're assuming and hoping that Austin Matthews makes his return after a 9-game hiatus in this one. It was kind of it was thought he could be ready to go for Wednesday's game. They decided to hold him out for another one. He wasn't quite ready to go. I'm hoping and assuming he will be for Saturday night, though, Dave. Like, this is a big matchup. Let's get in there, buddy. It's time to get. Big Poppy
Yeah,
back in the line.
he said he needed a couple practices under his legs. Like,
He's
okay,
got that.
this will be your second one if with practice on Friday. Let's get him out there. Like it's I think people are there's a little when you lose another forward, it's just like, okay, they're trying their best to get him along as easily as they can, but at the same time, you like, how many more players can you call up?
No, man, like they ran out of call ups when they had to bring up Alex Nylander. They had to
Yeah,
sign players from the Marlies. Like that's where they've gotten to. I mean, we're talking 7 players that are out of the lineup. Like that's
yeah,
nearly unprecedented. I can't remember a time where the Leafs have had that many players missing out of your lineup at once. Like that's just it's so many guys, and they've had to really dig deep. And credit to the team, they've been able to win and rattle off games. They went 7-2 in his absence. So they haven't really suffered. We talked about yesterday how the 5-on-5 goals have not really come. They're 31st in the NHL in 5-on-5 goals in his absence. But they were winning games. So it wasn't necessarily something that was pinpointed a whole lot. A lot of that was because the power play finally got cooking. It's been, north of 35% in the time that Matthews has been gone. But that's not going to be the expectation the whole season. So you got to get some goals going at 5-on-5. And there ain't no one better in the NHL than Austin Matthews when it comes to 5-on-5 scoring. So, he returns. The interesting thing will be, though, like if McMahon isn't ready to play, are they going to put Marner and Matthews back together? Because we had really come to like and appreciate what the McMahon, Tavares, and Marner line could do. And it made sense to keep that trio together and then put Matthews in a line with William Nylander and whatever other forward is healthy,
yeah.
realistically, that can play a top 6 role. But if McMahon's not there, would you maybe consider just saying, all right, we'll scrap that idea. We'll go back to the Marner, Matthews, Nylander, Tavares duos that we've come to see and what we've known for the past few years.
I don't know. I think they'll try to keep it. I think they'll try to. I know McMahon. It might just be as simple as you look at a guy like Urbankin, you're gonna take McMahon's spot. I think
Yeah,
that'd be the simpler one than to just have to bring Matthews with, because really I think it's also more so the John Tavares Mitch Marner connection they also want to keep together too, right?
true, very true.
And Matthews is good enough defensively on his own. They like what Pontus Holmberg is doing. And so like I don't think it's necessary just because Bob McMahon's you need to put them together. And I just like the idea of spreading those two out, right? You're struggling to get goals at 5-on-5. I understand it might just be easy to just put them together, but you also want to have a little bit of depth, right? You want to spread things around a little bit. So Tampa's not like, all right, let's just shut down Matthews and Marner and have someone else beat us, right?
No, I agree with that
Yeah.
take. I was just kind
Yeah.
of bringing up an alternate point there. I
Exactly.
do
Yeah.
think they should keep them separate, and I think it balances out the lineup. I think it actually gives you more offense if you have them balanced out because that allows Marner to continue to do what he's been able to do. The guy has points in 5 straight. I think he's got 9 points the last 5 games, so he's been unbelievable in this stretch here without Matthews. So keep him without Matthews. Matthews can enter back into the lineup, but just have them be separate. I think that's totally fine. Nines will be another game time decision. Not sure. He did skate with the team Tuesday, didn't end up playing the game on Wednesday. So I hope maybe he'll be good to go potentially come Saturday. Again, another game time decision. You'll have to get updated by the team Saturday morning. I guess the other question is who's going to start in goal. Do you go back to Anthony Stolarz or you giving it to Joe Wall tomorrow night?
I think it's going to be Wall. I think they're going to go with him. I don't think this is because Stolarz had one bad game. I just think that
No, but do you think Wool is closing in on like the 1A role, 1A job?
not yet. He's still catching up, right? Like Stolarz had a head start on him, and I don't think his the lack of playing time for Stolarz had anything to do with his play. I think it was just they wanted to get Joseph Woll up to speed too. So I think you know what, if he has a good game against Tampa, I think you can start to make that argument. I don't think it's there yet, just because Stolarz has been so steady and he was stealing them games,
Mm,
right? And
yep.
Wool has done that too the last little bit. I'm very curious to see if he does beat Tampa, do does that narrative start to shift a little bit though?
I think it has a good chance to make that happen because they've been alternating starts for a little bit. Wall did get those back-to-back starts after he shut out Vegas. He got the game against Utah as well. So he does have the bulk of the starts over the course of the last couple of weeks here. But again, I think it's also, to your point, just two things. One, I want to allow Anthony Stolarz to rest because he took on a much bigger workload in the first month of the season that I don't think anyone expected him to take on, and he's never done it before. And also just the schedule. There just wasn't a lot of games also. So, I still think it's going to turn into a we'll ride the hot hand. And right now they're both hot. Like I know, Stolarz didn't have the best game the other night against Florida. So, eh, but it was just one game, and it was not that it was bad. It just wasn't excellent, right? So, I think that right now you still continue to alternate back and forth until you feel comfortable until one falters, realistically. Hopefully neither falter. Hopefully they can have a Swayman Allmark situation where both goalies just churn out wins and quality starts game in, game out. And then, we'll make that determination come playoff time, I guess, who gets the start. But I believe it probably will and should be Wall. Plus, Joseph Wall has played this Tampa team a lot, and he's had some success throughout his career. He's played in Amalie Arena a couple of times, so I think that's another possibility to go back to Joe Wall. All right, anything else you want to bring up when we talking about previewing this game tomorrow night?
I just think if you're looking at a player to be locked on with the Lightning, it's Brandon Hagel.
Mm,
That guy has been on a tear this season. And I'm sure many, and I always get this brought up by a buddy of mine where there was that
Greenleaf.
failed trade with Chicago that didn't go through, where Brandon Hagel was, give us Matthew Nyes. We'll take on that Mrazek contract, and you'll also get Brandon Hagel.
Mm-hmm.
Matthew Nyes is good. Brandon Hagel has been really good.
Yeah, Brandon Hagel, pretty good player. And always really, I mean, he kind of has been for the
Yeah.
last couple of seasons. He's been one of the more slept on players in the NHL. But yeah, he's got 26 points so far this year, 26 points in 21 games for Brandon Hagel. So that's a pace over 90 points for the season. I expect that to slow down a little bit, but it's nice. Good to see out of Brandon Hagel. So definitely someone to be locked in on the opposing side. All right, coming up on the other side, it's Black Friday across North America, and it's usually a time where people like to go and do some shopping. And we thought it'd be fun to see if we could go shopping for a player for the Maple Leafs. We'll play the role of Brad Trulevik, trying to acquire some help for this Maple Leafs hockey team. So we're going to do that on the other side, and then we will continue our contenders and pretenders segment from yesterday. We did the Eastern Conference. We'll do the Western Conference in a little bit. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks curates and makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever you're looking to get tickets to. They've got a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, and they've got the lowest price guarantee, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
Today's episode is also brought to you by Built Rewards. With the seasons changing, I'm already dreaming of a warm weather getaway. I love using points for travel, and I'm always looking for ways to earn more to book on my next flight. Here's a life hack for you. Built lets you earn points on rent payments and redeem them towards flights, hotels, and a lot more. one of your biggest investments should get you more than just a roof over your head. Let me explain. There's no cost to join Built, and as a member, you'll earn valuable points on rent and on your everyday spending. Built points can be transferred to your favorite hotels and airlines, and even the ones you haven't heard of. There are over 500 airlines and 700,000 hotels and properties around the world you can redeem your Built points towards. Points can also be redeemed towards a future rent payment and unique experiences that only Built members can access. So if you're not earning points on rent, my question is, why not? Start earning points on your rent you're already paying by going to joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNHL. That's joinbilt.com/LockedOnNHL. Make sure to use our URL so you know we sent you. To start earning points on your rent payment today, go to jointbuilt.com/LockedOnNHL.
Welcome back into the Locked On at Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti with you here on the show. We have new episodes coming out each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. You can find it wherever you get a podcast and also up on YouTube. All right, Dave. It's Black Friday across North America. I know you've done a little bit of shopping. I still got some shopping that I got to get done. Good time to get those that early Christmas shopping done on days like these where there's a lot of sales going on. And speaking of sales and fire sales and whatnot, I thought it'd be fun for us to do a little segment of Black Friday shopping. And we're playing the role of Brad Treliving and trying to make some deals ourselves. So I thought it'd be fun if we came up with 3 trade targets that the Maple Leafs could try and deal for. And let's get this thing kicked off. Who's the first guy that you have on your list?
First guy, and he's one that's been talked about a couple times, and it's Brock Nelson, the New York Islanders.
All right. I like it.
He's kind of it's funny because in my opinion, he's a bit of an under the radar name. When I first saw his name appear in a couple of like trade ideas, I think Myrtle had something. Luke Fox said that he'd be an interesting target, and
he is one of the more underrated players, I think, in the league. Like what he's been able to do the last few years on the island, like no one's paying attention to what this guy's doing. 37 goals back in 2021-22, 3 years ago. 2 years ago, 36 goals. Last year, 34 goals. Like he's just been a beacon of consistency. Like a guy turned 30 and all of a sudden became a goal scoring machine. He's got 10 so far through 23, on pace again for about mid 30s, mid to high 30s in goals again. Like, and he plays center. He kind of checks a lot of boxes.
Checks a lot of boxes. And when we're talking about needing those goals at 5-on-5, right? You said he had 37 a couple years ago.
Yeah.
26 of those were at even strength. 30 of the 36 he had when he had 30 of the 36 a few years ago were even strength. 24 of the 34 last year also at even strength. So he's not a guy that's getting a lot of those power play goals. That's not where he's making his production. He is doing it at even strength. That's what you like to see as well. And he's also, what I like about him, 6'4", 210 pounds.
Big boy.
Big boy, right? You know, that's something that the Leafs would definitely like to entertain bringing in. And yeah, while when you also look at the playoff stats too, he does perform, right? I think in the year before the pandemic, he had 18 points in 22 playoff games.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. He's got 50 playoff points in 78 playoff games.
Yeah. Like that's pretty good for a guy who's not a number one, like not a top line player.
Yeah.
Like, or even a top line center, right? Like that's the secondary type of production you need in the playoffs. I think that's exactly what he would bring.
He's got a nickname, saying on Hockey Reference, Mr. Overtime. How many overtime winners does he have to get that type of nickname? Like how many game-winning goals does this guy have? He does have a game-winning goal, like literally a few years or a few games ago, he got a game-winning goal. He has 3 game-winning goals in the playoffs, actually. No, sorry. A lot more than that. He's got 7 game-winning goals in the playoffs. So maybe that's why. Maybe they all came in overtime too. That's why they
That
started
was an
calling him.
Anthony. I'm just searching right now. Anthony Beauvillier dubbed nickname Mr. Overtime for Brock
Mm.
Nelson.
He's got 43 game-winning goals in the regular season, and then 7 in the playoffs. He's got 50 game-winning goals throughout his career. Um, Probably a bunch of them have come in overtime. So interesting. Something that the Maple Leafs could use too. Someone clutch in OT. I like Brock Nelson. That's actually a really good name. I didn't put him on my list, but I actually think that's a very, very good acquisition that could be made by the Maple Leafs. He's kind of a perfect number 2, number 3 center. What's the contract situation? Is he a pending UFA?
Pending UFA, he's at $6 million for this year.
Yeah,
So
so
it's a bit of a pricey cap it, but New York would probably entertain taking half, and you find another team to take another part of that
exactly.
as well.
Exactly, and the salary is only 4 million, so it's less actual dollars too, which makes it a lot easier for teams to eat some money. So Brock Nelson might be right at the top of the board realistically. So I'm glad you brought him to the fold. I think in the Leafs might want to go back to the well of Ryan O'Reilly. What do
He
you
was
think
second on
about?
my list.
Yeah, I think O'Reilly could be another interesting piece to bring in. I mean, he got hurt in the playoffs, so we didn't get the full O'Reilly experience come playoff time. But prior to the injury, and he got hurt in the regular season too. When he was healthy, he gave this Leafs team exactly what they needed, and I still think that he could play. Like only 13 points through 23 games this year, but he's playing on a team that's just not playing that well right now. Obviously, they're one of the worst teams in the league in Nashville. They're not generating any offense as a group, so it's tough to look at the points and say the game's fallen off. But I think at $4.5 million AAV, he's got 2 more years left on the deal after this. So you've got a couple years of Ryan O'Reilly. If he can get maybe, I don't know because there's term left, to be tough to get Nashville to eat, but maybe they do. But I think Ryan O'Reilly could be the perfect person to bring back into Toronto. And I think now that Chief is here, a guy who was the captain when Chief won the Stanley Cup, right? Ryan O'Reilly was his captain. Ryan O'Reilly won the Conn Smythe with Craig Berube as the coach of the St. Louis Blues. Like there's a reunion just waiting there, and he would be perfect to come in and help this team once again get over the hump there, because he's still a good player, good two-way guy, knows what the coach wants. He's a Stanley Cup champion, and if he could stay healthy, I think that'd be a monster pickup for the Leafs.
Yeah, and some people are probably going to also wonder if Ryan O'Reilly would even entertain going back to Toronto.
Well, I think the coaching change makes it a little more palatable to think that, right? Like
Like that
Sheldon
was
Keefe, maybe not, but with Craig Berube, maybe he does think about it.
Craig Berube is one. You also think with what's going on in Nashville right now, does he want to be a part of that too? He's been a very outspoken player in a lot of these losses. He's always kind of the go-to quote for a lot of the guys. Like he's criticized his own play, but everything is in Nashville. Like Barry Trotz made it clear, he's willing to make moves. He's willing to move guys, and there aren't many like a lot of those new players they brought in. They're kind of tied down, right, with the contracts that they signed and the clauses. Ryan O'Reilly might be one of those players you might consider, and again, that's a pretty. It's an easier contract to bring in too, 4.5 cap it. It's pretty good, even if he eventually becomes like your. I see him as the number 2, worst case number 3. Right?
Yeah, like he may end this contract 2 years from now as the third line center, but like with the cap going up, 4.5 million for your 3C, who can kill penalties and who can play on your power play, at least the second unit, you can get by paying that. Like I really think you can. So the contract does not scare me too much, even if they have to take on the full freight. I think it's something that they could work with. They would have to move out some money to make it happen, obviously, but I think that they would figure it out to bring in a talent like Ryan O'Reilly. We'll get back to the conversation in just a second, but I want to take a moment to tell you about one of today's show sponsors, and it's our good friends over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NHL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NHL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Network. So he was your second guy. So my second guy on the list for me was Michael Granlund, actually. And I remember we did this last year, and I think I had Granlund on my list at that point as well. And he went on to have a great season last year with the San Jose Sharks. Like, the team was absolutely garbage, but Granlund himself ended up having a pretty good season. If I'm not mistaken, he ended up, 60 points in 69 games, so nearly a point per game. And he's doing just the same this year. 24 points in 23 games. Here he has 9 goals. He only had 12 goals last year. He already has 9 this year. He's just playing some good hockey in San Jose, but that's a team that no one expects to be competitive, and they got to get rid of their pending UFAs, and they got to make sure that they get value for guys like that. And Michael Granlund, I think they could get something for him, whether it's a first-round pick or, a prospect or a second and a prospect or something. But Michael Granlund could come in and give this team a nice little boost of offense in the middle six, down the middle, and that's exactly what they need. So Granlund would be an interesting piece for me, and he'll definitely be available come trade deadline and possibly even as early as this weekend.
Yeah, I think that's also true. Like, San Jose is willing to get rid of anyone that's they're able to strip away, and
they'll eat the contract too, right? Like, it's
yeah,
$5
they
million cap, but they'll certainly retain.
Yeah, they definitely will. And Granlund's been a player that I think people have wondered about with the Leafs for a while, right? I think he was a player that maybe the Leafs have kicked the tires on, in free agency, and it just never really.
The Dubas era Leafs.
Yeah.
Kick the tires. The Dubas era, yeah.
Yeah, but I just see, he's a guy that maybe in a new situation, he'll thrive a little bit more than, what he's doing in San Jose. And I think people need to realize that. What you see in
he's
one
thriving
team,
in San Jose right now. He's doing really well in San Jose.
He's
point per game player.
A performance like that doesn't get highlighted because of how bad the team is.
No, exactly. Yeah.
So I think that's something to definitely the Leafs could definitely consider. And he might be one of those players that maybe you can get for not so much because if you get him early enough, right? The Leafs can also do this earlier maybe than some teams, considering the openings they might have.
Yeah, well, lots of injuries too. Obviously, it's a big problem that the team has right now. Yeah, well, we'll see if they can make it work, but that is an interesting name to keep an eye on. Who's the third guy on your list, Dave?
I was flip-flopping with a couple of players because it's hard to find centers. It really is. And one person brought this name up to me, and I thought, as a second line, probably not. Maybe as a third line guy, Frank Vatrano.
Oh, Frankie Vatrano. Okay. Did he just sign a deal last year with Anaheim, an extension?
I believe he did. He did. He's a player that actually he's on a pretty reasonable deal. Actually, he's on the last year of his deal. He's a pending UFA at $3.65 million. And like what I like about him is
he had 37 goals last year.
Yeah,
I remember he had like a good year. I didn't realize it was like 37 good. That was like
he had he went on like a tear in a few games.
But we had him on the fantasy team at one point, remember?
Yep. Yes, we did, and he was crushing it. Yeah. But I also look back to his time with the Rangers when they went on their run a few years ago. He played a part in that. 13 points in 20 games in that playoff run. Didn't play a lot, but when he did play, he was productive. And that's the type of player the Leafs need. He doesn't necessarily need to play a lot of minutes, but when he does play, he needs to be productive, and that's what he's done. 60 points last year, 41 the year before that. Anaheim's not, again, people are going to say, but he's got terrible, like he's got a terrible plus minus. He's playing for Anaheim. It's like doing the same for a guy who plays for San Jose. Those guys aren't on good teams. But when he does play for a good team, you can even look at his time with Florida, 24 goals he had there at one point. And like he's a guy that in the right situation, I think he can perform. I think that's the type of player the Leafs could use come playoff time. And and I probably wouldn't cost as much as the other guys.
Yeah,
well.
no. Oh, for sure. I think that he wouldn't cost as much as those players. And, he can play kind of up and down your lineup too, which is always good. And he's defensively responsible, which is something that obviously Craig Berube is going to value in a player. So I like for Toronto as an option as well. I was being a little cheeky with this one. It's more so because I wanted to have the conversation with you and get your thoughts on it. But what about a guy like David Urachek? Dave currently wants out of Columbus. He was a top 10 pick just 2 years ago in Columbus, and big body, 6'4", over 200 pounds. He's like 6'4", 210, right shot defenseman. Like those things don't grow on trees, right? He wants out of Columbus. Columbus looking for a dance partner of some kind. The Leafs, they've played well defensively, don't get me wrong, and they look good, but they need like a bona fide potential top pair right shot guy. Like Chris Tanev is not going to be that for much longer, right? And they kind of need someone who could possibly blossom into a top four at the very least and help this team along as that defensive core starts to age out. And I wonder if you could get a guy like David Urachek for pennies on the dollar right now. Again, you're going Black Friday shopping, pal. You're getting a steal potentially. If I were tree living, I'd at least be checking in, calling to see, hey, what are you looking for? Are you looking for another young player in return, or possibly a package of players, young players, and a pick of some kind? But that would be a player that does intrigue me just because the tools are there. These are physical specimens. He's the type of body and size that Tree Living wants. And I mean, there was a pedigree 2 years ago for him to be, what was he, fifth, sixth overall, something like that. There's a good young talent there. And I wonder if Tree Living will be willing to roll the dice and try and cultivate that talent and bring in a potential young top four defenseman.
I think the big one here is, can you upgrade on what you have? I do think that there is certainly room for improvement on that third pairing. Like
right.
Timmins has been fine, right?
Fine, exactly. He's been fine, but
right, like
could be a far better player.
Oh, for sure, and that's why I say like
and in the future,
Timmins has been fine. Urachek would probably be better, right? And you're also, again, as you said, looking into the future a little bit here too. You have to think about, you don't have a wealth of right shot defensemen. You don't have anyone in the system that is a David Urachek either.
Danford, little like slightly maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it might be. Well, that's it, right? Like we don't know yet. Urachek is closer to it, right?
Yes.
At least you have a belief that he can be that. And again, Columbus is probably going to try to trade him. Obviously, trade him to the team that's going to give him the best package. But you're also wondering who's going to offer that package as well. Like he clearly wants to play, and some teams might be like, we can't guarantee you playing time either.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I don't think the Leafs would be at the front of the line in a Urachek trade. I don't think that they will be able to give them the best offer. But just for the sake of the conversation, for the sake of the segment, I wanted to bring his name up and see your thoughts on, if the Leafs at least should be inquiring in his services. Like,
Oh
who
yeah,
wouldn't be wanting a young 20-year-old,
absolutely.
6'4", 215-pound right shot defenseman who was a top 10 pick 2 years ago? Every team should be calling to be like, hey, what do you want for that declining asset you have there? What would you take? And try and get it for pennies on the dollar. Again, don't think the Leafs are at the front of the line. I think I saw Friedman, I believe, report that Edmonton has interest and could be willing to do, a young player for young player type of situation for him. But I'd be curious to see if Toronto can get in there, because that'd be a very intriguing young player to add to this nucleus if they can get it done. Um, yeah, so there it is. Those are the Black Friday shopping list. I had Mikhail Granlund, Ryan O'Reilly, and David Juracek. Dave, who are your three players?
Brock Nelson, Ryan O'Reilly, and Frank Vitrano.
There it is. We'll see if any of those guys become Maple Leafs at some point here. Probably not this weekend, but maybe, ahead of the deadline, perhaps a trade could get done where one of those six players comes to Toronto. I think we've run out of time to do our Western Conference Contenders Pretenders segment, so we might have to push that to after the weekend here, buddy, because we're already 35 minutes in.
Yeah.
That's what happens when we start doing these fun little trade segments like this. We sometimes get a little carried away. So I think that's going to do it for us here today on the podcast. We'll do the Contenders Pretenders segment next week. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti, and follow the show at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode for you guys tomorrow. Until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.